In this video, we're going to figure out how to show a button element on our home screen. This button element is going to show the text "Go to Components Demo," and eventually when a user taps on it, we're going to navigate that user over to the component screen. So let's give this a shot. I'm going to flip back over to my code editor. I'm already inside of my homescreen.js file. Now, as a quick aside here, I just want to mention very quickly, inside my app.js file, I also changed that initial route name in the last video. I did it very quickly, but I just want to remind you that I changed initial route name to be home instead. So now when my application starts up, I'm going to see the home screen by default. All right, so now inside my home screen file, at the very top, I'm going to import view and button. I'm only importing view right now because I'm going to use it to wrap this text element and a button that I'm about to place as well. Remember, from a React component, by default, we only return a single root element. So I'm going to use the view to wrap that text and that button. I'll first get started by wrapping that text element with the view. As a quick reminder, if you had a semicolon at the end of that line of text, it needs to be cleaned up. If you save this file as is, you're going to see an error saying that you've got some piece of text outside of a text element, because the semicolon inside of JSX is interpreted as being a piece of text that you want to print out. So I'm going to clean up that semicolon. I'll then save the file just to make sure that I don't have any errors. Okay, very good. So now, right after that text element, I'm going to place a button element. A button is a self-closing element, so notice how I don't have any separate closing tag for the button. Instead, I've got a single / and then a greater than sign right after it. When we show a button, we're not going to pass in some text we want to show inside of it, like so. We don't do that. Instead, to show some text inside of a button element, we're going to pass it a prop called title. So I'm going to pass in a title prop, and it's going to be a string. In JSX, we can designate a string or pass a string to a prop without using those red curly brackets. This is one of the very few exceptions when we're trying to assign a value to a prop. For just about every other type of value, we're always going to use those red curly brackets. But for strings, we can simply use double quotes like so. So I'm going to give this button a title of exactly what our mockup showed back over here. So go to components demo. Go to components demo. If I then save that, I'll see the button appear on the screen. Looks good. So that's the default styling of a button. If you're on Android, you're going to see the default styling looking like so. So the button element is going to change how it looks depending upon the platform that you're running on. If you're on Android, you're going to get a very typical looking Android button. And if you're on iOS, you're going to get that nice kind of blue text button instead. So just showing a button is not quite enough to actually add anything to our application. We also want to have the ability to run some code or essentially handle whenever a user taps on this thing as well. So to run some code or respond to a user tapping on that button, we can add in an additional prop to the button element. To get started, I'm going to first put a new line inside of here just to give myself a little bit more space. And then either before or after, it doesn't make a difference, the title prop, we're going to add in another prop called onPress. Now this is a very special prop, just like title is. Notice how I have on and then capital P for press. If you change the spelling of this prop, it's not going to work appropriately. The button element expects to be passed a prop called specifically onPress with exactly that capitalization. When we designate the onPress prop, we then pass it a function. This function is going to be called anytime a user, as you might guess, presses that button. So for right now, let's just try doing a console log inside of here. So I'll do console log button pressed, like so. So now in theory, whenever we press on that button, we should see a console log appear. So I'll save this and then press on the button 1 or 2 times. But I don't immediately see a console log appear anywhere. So where do console logs appear when we're running React Native? Well, they always appear in the same terminal window that's running your React Native packager. So if I flip back over to my terminal and find the window that's running my packager, I'll see the console logs right here from the 3 times that I just pressed that button. I can do the same thing on Android as well. So on Android, I'll tap on that button a couple times, go back over to my terminal, and I can see some additional number of console logs. Okay, so that's how we use a simple button primitive with React Native. Again, a button primitive is a very simple component. It's really just going to show a button without really a lot more customization options. We can change some simple styling options around this thing, But for anything more advanced, we usually end up wanting to use that other kind of component for detecting presses called that touchable opacity thing. So let's take another quick pause right here. When we come back to the next video, we're going to figure out how to use the touchable opacity instead. We're just going to do this as kind of like a counterpoint so you can see both different approaches. So quick pause and I'll see you in just a minute.